Hello, dear friends of the Eurovision Song Contest. Here we go again for the second semi-final of our Eurovision's International Conference. And your Eurovision's team is me, Irving Walter, and my beautiful colleagues, Carla Figueira, Isabel Campello, and Sofia Vieira Lopes. So, tonight I hope you will have a good connection and we will have a good sound and without any echoes. I worked hard on it and I also worked on our live chat. So, you will have the opportunity to be in contact with us and with our two guests that will be in the roundtable later via our live chat window. So, here you can see Hari. Thank you. Hello. We are happy that you're with us. And you can talk with us. You can ask questions. You can raise any interesting topics that we can discuss in our roundtable. And now I hand over to Carla.
Hi, I'm Carla Figueira. I'll be one of your hosts today. I'm an academic at Goldsmiths University of London. And now my colleague Isabel will briefly introduce herself.
Hello, everybody. Here we are again. My name is Isabel Campillo. I'm a singer, I'm a vocal coach, and I'm also a researcher in musical sciences. So without further delay, I'm going to hand it over to my next colleague, Sofia Vieira Lopes.
Hello, thank you for being with us in this second session of Eurovision's International Conference. So I'm a scholar in Nova University of Lisbon. And 2 years ago, I've created this wonderful conference with my friend Irving. And now Isabel and Carla join us also in this team. So I will introduce our first interview. So today, our guest is Jess Neal, a researcher in the School of Humanities and Communication at the University of Southern Queensland in Australia. And her research topics are nation branding, identity, and fandom in Australia. So she has many interesting publications about Eurovision in his country. And let's hear Jess. So thank you for being with us.
As I just finished saying, are you a fan of the Eurovision Song Contest as well as a researcher of the Eurovision Song Contest?
Absolutely. I'm a big fan, a lifelong fan, although I had a bit of a gap there. And I think it's almost crucial in some ways when looking at Eurovision to have an appreciation of the contest. And if you come at it from the perspective of being a fan, it means that you never work a day in your life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I understand what you mean. It's similar as being a musician as I am, and studying music as an ethnomusicologist. It sounds as if you're not really, you're just it's doing it, but in another way, so it doesn't really feel like hard work at all. Okay, so now Sophia is asking you.
So just a little detail. Since when you watch Eurovision?
I watched it as a child, and I don't know when I first started watching it. It's just one of those vague memories that I have of being a kid at home watching it with my family. But then when I was a teenager, I stopped watching it because I was too cool for that. But I started watching it again in my early 20s and basically have not stopped since.
We all go through that phase of, now we're too cool to the Eurovision Song Contest.
Yeah. The great irony with that, though, is that when I stopped watching Eurovision, I was listening to bands like Hooverphonic, who were obviously supposed to be in this year's Eurovision.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Like a full circle for me.
Exactly.
Great. So bearing in mind the almost generalized lack of academic interest that Eurovision triggers along these years, how did you become, as a researcher, interested in this topic?
It was kind of pure accident in some ways, because in terms of my broad body of research, I've always been really interested in multiculturalism and popular culture, and I've concentrated on a lot of the stuff happening in Australia on Australian television and literature and film. And my fandom of Eurovision was this separate thing. Like, I would have Eurovision parties with my friends and we'd talk about the politics of it and connect it to ideas of multiculturalism in Australia. But I never put the connection between what I was enjoying in that to Eurovision. And then one year I was just talking about it with a colleague at USQ, and it was the first time that I'd met an academic who was also interested in Eurovision. So she and I started talking about it in a whole different light. At the same time, a call for papers went out for a special issue about Eurovision, and I thought, this is an opportunity for me to start to explore this in a way that's more academic rather than a personal interest, and it just sort of exploded from there.
Yeah. When you start studying Eurovision?
It would have been the end of 2014 was when I started, and my first publication for it was in 2015.
Oh, yeah, great.
Great.
So, Jess, as someone who has been researching these subjects, like multiculturalism, as you've just said, how do you perceive the negotiation between the Australian identity and the idea of an European community in the Eurovision Song Contest? It's probably a question that many people have asked you, but it's for us as Europeans, it's really interesting to understand this articulation between Australia and, I mean, we do know that you have ancestors back in Europe. Well, not Europe anymore, actually, but anyway, it doesn't matter. But this articulation between the Australian identity and sort of a European community in the Eurovision Song Contest, what can you tell us about that?
It is really complicated by those ideas of colonisation and of immigration. So those are the ties that bind us back to this idea of Europe in a whole variety of ways. Obviously, the one with colonisation is incredibly complex. And certainly when you look at the representation of Australia at the Eurovision Song Contest, you've seen the way that there's been a sort of deliberate and strategic playfulness with that colonial relationship through the representation of Australia by several Indigenous artists, which has been really quite extraordinary, both for those artists and for Australia to be represented in that way. But one of the things that also comes out in that relationship is how it's used strategically to connect us back to Europe, how we'll invoke this migration history in particular. We tend not to talk about the colonial relationships because it is in the too hard basket. So when we talk about Australia's relationship with Eurovision, it's filtered through this idea of Australia as a migrant nation that had vast waves of European migrants, especially after the Second World War. So this is the kind of narrative that we hook into. The interesting thing, though, is that that's not really multicultural Australia today. And at the time that Eurovision appeared in Australia in the early 1980s, that's when it first appears on our TV, our migration history is starting to shift. We're not getting as many European migrants. We're starting to have an entirely different demographic from Asia and the Middle East start to come through. And they are also big fans of Eurovision. So it gets sort of embraced by a multicultural Australia in an entirely different way. So what I found is that this idea of connecting to Europe is an incredibly strategic thing. It's got a beautiful romantic element to it, but it is strategic because it justifies our presence in there. But conversely, there is a really pragmatic aspect to it for the EBU in particular, in that, the ongoing project of Eurovision Asia, it's a strategic thing for them to link with Australia because it gives a geographical base to that kind of expansion into this part of the world. So it's both romantic and strategic.
Wow, really, it gets better and better, as you know more about, the behind the curtains of Eurovision. It's really an increasingly interesting topic. Great. So, Sophia, do you want to ask
So
something?
this identitarian negotiation that you are talking about, it's always this negotiation. According to your perception, in these two different levels, the macro level, the institutions, and this kind of micro level, mainly the fans and the audience, how these two levels articulate in Australia dealing with this identity negotiation, as you what you can say us about it.
I think it was really interesting in those early years of Australia being represented where we weren't selecting, or we, the fans, weren't selecting the artists. It was an internal selection. And so you can see how that was being governed by particular broadcaster and record label decisions. So it was kind of a corporate / nationalist decision-making process, we could say, because they had a particular idea of representing Australia in a specific way, and also that partnership with the record label meant that certain artists were on the cards there. One thing to remember with Australia's broadcaster of Eurovision, SBS, is that they are our multicultural broadcaster and they're a national broadcaster. So they have a very specific remit where they have to represent Australia as a multicultural nation, which they do fairly easily and unproblematically. So that was kind of quite important to the way that they were structuring that. That said, when I was talking to fans about their response to those selections, a lot of the time they felt, yes, they were all artists who represented them as Australians. They were often very familiar artists, usually through reality television programs, and they really embraced the kind of multicultural dimension of them as well. So even though it was a kind of a top-down imposition of a particular representation, the fans did respond to it quite positively. But it was also at the same time treated a bit ironically by some of them, wherein when it came to the next Eurovision year and people would start speculating about who's going to be next, they would just go through and pick, you know, artists who are ethnically and racially diverse and go, well, it could be any of these. So it was embraced, but at the same time, in a perhaps a fairly typical way, it was dealt with a little bit of humor as well.
Yeah, humor is always nice. Okay,
yes.
So let's get back to the fans again, to the fan community. And the next question that we have for you is, how do you perceive the dynamics of the fan community through the digital platforms, such as, for instance, what happened during the 2 online shows, the Eurovision Song Celebration 2020 this year? So how do you perceive that?
Eurovision fans are some of the most online fans that I think you can find attached to any kind of pop culture thing. I spend half my time on Twitter as research, just tracking the way that fans are interacting with one another and interacting with the text. And in 2020 in particular, it's been the thing that has saved the individual fans, the community of fans, and in some ways the contest as well. It was really wonderful to see the way that the EBU and Eurovision embraced that as part of the celebrations process. And I think what we really saw within that was participatory culture and convergence culture in action, with the fans who were creating the content. And dare I say, it was some of the better content. It was really quite exciting to see what the fans were doing to fill that gap and to still feel connected to the contest at a time when it was so easy for us to all disconnect from it.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, so it is interesting. We talked yesterday with an Australian fan that is also a DJ. He will be the next interviewer of our conference this year, and Alan told us that are expected about 2,000 fans that will travel from Australia to Rotterdam, but unfortunately this year no one traveled at all. You see this pandemic situation that affects the Eurovision in this year could trigger more this interaction online or not?
I think it could trigger more online. It certainly has really changed the way that those, because usually with Eurovision, it's a lot of back and forth on Twitter and occasional memes popping up. And obviously the fan blogs and websites are incredibly active and they produce the most amazing content. I couldn't do my research, honestly, without a lot of that fan blogging. They're quite extraordinary in what they do. But what we've seen this year is a real movement beyond that in many ways. And I think the thing that exemplifies that the most is obviously Eurovision again, as that watching party happening online. So, you know, Eurovision fans, when it's on, are on Twitter and we're all kind of competing with one another to come up with the best comments. And that happens, you know, at the same time. And it's an important part because it brings the fandom together as a community across the globe. We've got, you know, people here in Australia like myself up at 5 o'clock in the morning to participate in those sorts of conversations. And it was that idea that we weren't going to be together in May that I think a lot of fans were really concerned about and were worried was going to be taken away from them. So Eurovision again has sort of filled in that gap, but not just for 3 nights in May. This has been every weekend with a different contest. And the way that this has been a collaboration with the participation of the broadcasters and the EBU in assisting to get the streamings up has been really quite extraordinary. So I think we're also seeing a turning point in that relationship between the fans and the various organisations around the contest as well, with this inviting greater collaboration between them.
So now I would like to know, what did you think about the Eurovision Shine a Light? Speaking of, outcomes for this pandemic situation, you know, how did you, well, I can ask you both as a researcher and as a fan, because these two functions maybe merge, I don't know. But I mean, what did you think of this alternative that was sort of conceived to give the fans and to the world audience of the Eurovision Song Contest something, you know, something to, well, not to let the Eurovision make and the Eurovision community even more defeated than, not defeated, but disillusioned for the fact that there would be no Eurovision contest. So how did you perceive the Eurovision Shine a Light event?
It was always going to be a really difficult event to get the balance right, because obviously we're talking about a pandemic that has affected the world in, I'm not going to say unprecedented because we have had pandemics before, but we're responding to it in a slightly different way, and we have different technologies that enable us to continue our lives. But the pandemic is something quite extraordinary and also quite devastating with the number of infections and the number of deaths that we've seen worldwide. So on the one hand, you've got this crisis, and on the other hand, you've got this idea of trying to bring together community and celebration without belittling what is actually happening in the world. And they were trying to strike a balance between those two things. I do feel that the tone was a little bit too somber for this idea of hope and celebration that I felt was the intention originally behind it. And that's why when you look back at the semi-final celebration shows and the involvement of the fans in, you know, recreating videos and whatnot, there was a joy in what those fans were doing. So even though they weren't going to the contest or they weren't going to be able to watch all of the competition, they were still finding this joy in the songs and in the performances. Then you look at Shine a Light, and a lot of that joy wasn't there. And again, understanding it's a difficult production to have conceived of and to have executed. And certainly I would have liked to see more of the performers themselves singing their songs, even if it was a pre-recorded thing, and still not to be competitive. So the idea of competition is perhaps not useful right now. But yeah, it didn't quite scratch that itch, I think, for a lot of people that the contest itself would usually satisfy. So, but as a researcher, it's incredibly interesting because you've got this attempt to put together a global show at a time of global crisis and pandemic. It is a really rich text that I'm going to have to go back and watch a few more times, to be honest.
Yeah, in other words, so you thought that the Eurovision Song Celebration 2020, those two online events had a lighter tone as opposed to a more institutionalized tone that the Europe Shine a Light event sort of had, maybe, I don't know. It's interesting because okay, it's interesting. I'll tell you later.
So, Jess, to finish and to do a kind of wrap up of we are talking about, because we talk about two dimensions, not that function very close together. This idea of identity and also the fandom and these very big dynamics between fans and the fans in themselves dealing with identity of themselves and as a country. So could you do a wrap up and explain to us here in Portugal and in Europe that maybe don't know nothing about the research in Australia, what you can say to close our small conversation?
I think one of the most important things to remember about a lot of Eurovision fans is they embody a kind of cosmopolitan and transnational spirit, in that even though we're always going to back our home country in many ways that might be so ingrained in who we are, even though we might do that, we're always going to have our favorites who are unconnected to us in a variety of ways. I know I have particular countries that I'm fans of, which sounds kind of really odd, but this is the common thing with Eurovision fans. So they both embrace the national spirit or nationalist spirit that's encouraged by having a competition of nations around song, but they also are constantly crossing those boundaries. And the community itself is international. There is no real strong sense, I think, in some ways, of them being tied to particular places. They're united by this idea of being Eurovision fans. And that has been an integral part for Australian fans in feeling connected to a global community, because we are so far away. And so it is really easy to feel disconnected. So Eurovision has been useful and important in giving Australians that sense of connection to a big global community and of being able to be part of that. So it's been great.
That's really interesting.
Great.
Really.
Great.
Yeah.
So I have to thank you.
Yeah, this was a very interesting insight from down under, from the other side of this world, and we are happy to have Australia not only in the Eurovision Song Contest but also in the EUROVISIONS Conference. Thank you so much, Jess. So the fan community had to find things to keep up with the loss, with the cancellation of the Eurovision Song Contest 2020, and there have been lots of alternative events around the contest. Online events. One of them was Eurostream 2020, and our next guest is Paula Schmanner, the organizer of this online event, and he will tell us lots of interesting things about it. Hello, I'm very happy to have Paula Schmanner with me, a big Eurovision fan since when?
1987.
How did it all start?
I think my parents, they now regret letting me watch the Brussels Eurovision Song Contest. well, the year before it was already in the news with Sandra Kim winning it, and that led to them allowing me to watch the national final, which I just only realized that I watched it before, and then watching the preview clips, but then actually getting to stay up late in 1987 and then watching it for the first time. And I think I fell in love with the flags first that were on the scoreboards, and eventually it rapidly evolved into the love for the contest itself. I mean, the stages, the songs, okay, yeah, somewhat, but mainly the whole competition itself. That's how it started for me.
I see. So, how did it influence you when this year the Eurovision Song Contest was cancelled due to the COVID-19 crisis?
My then roommate, he has. I'll start again. I was living together with the chief editor of Songfestival.be, Jonathan Hendricks, and when we heard that Eurovision was going to be cancelled, we said maybe we should like try and think of organizing our own event. And he was immediately like on board, but we didn't know exactly how and what shape it would take. So it took us a few weeks to like find like-minded people to actually get around an idea and a concept that we could actually fill in and actually flesh out, and eventually that became Eurostream 2020, which was supposed to be a one-off, and I still hope it's going to be only a one-off this year. Yeah.
So, couldn't you imagine a year without Eurovision and without the competition? Why did you think you have to do this kind of event?
I didn't think I have to. At some point, actually, I said, well, if it's going to be too much work, I'd rather not do it, because I could see all the work coming at me, and I was like, yeah, whatever. But I think it's more, for me, it was more like a thing that well, we are already all of these Eurovision websites on all our little islands, and maybe this is the time where we should all get around one idea and say, let's, with the fan sites, hold this contest now, and then this alternative contest, because EBU can't, won't, will not, would like not, or organize anything like that. And we said, well, maybe we can then put up something which is similar to the thing. And it was always going to be involved with having a public vote of some sorts. And luckily we had our guy from ESC Nation, Ben Tuminaro, who wrote ScoreWiz, who then was immediately on board and was like, okay, I want to be part of this. And so that gave us like a real boost to getting where we were eventually with the webcast. Yeah.
So while the EBU had some, let's say, issues with bringing together their own members, the ones were saying, yeah, we're going to do a special show. The others, no, we don't know, or we're going to take over Europe Shine the Light. So you managed to do totally the contrary, to bring people together that normally don't work together. How difficult was it?
Yeah, but very. Actually, there were two issues. Since we already took like 2 or 3 weeks at that point just to come up with a concept, then, which we then could go to other partners with, that led to us within the core group deciding that there was like going to be like a deadline on when partners could like sign in. And that meant we only had a few days, a week and a half to actually find the partners. And when it's something so new and everyone is still like finding their own bearings in a crisis in each different country, where the regulations are different, where the limitations are different, where the restrictions are different, then response is not always immediate. And and people were not always immediately on board, and some were immediately on board, said, yeah, heck, sign me up, we wanted to be a part of that. And it had its challenges. And then also big sites like blogs, they had clearly their own thing, so they weren't really interested. And then other sites, they just were like, yeah, we're just not going to do anything, so not really interested. So but the ones that were, and the ones that we got to in time, they were very enthusiastic to be part of it.
Mm-hmm. So I wrote in one other fan page when they were talking about Euroscene 2020 that it was an initiative of the smaller fan sites in Europe. So do you feel like an assembly of San Marino, Andorra, Monaco, and Luxembourg compared to the Big Five, or what makes Euroscene really special?
I would actually compare it to the situation in Asia. So it was almost like an Asia vision, where Songfestival.be was clearly one of the big ones. Although we had ESCast, which is they were a very active partner in this story. So maybe it wasn't like the big Anglo-Saxon websites that took part. And again, we have ESC Insight, which is also a quite large provider of good content, I would say. And yes, we did sprinkle them with smaller websites, but they were the ones that immediately saw the potential of jumping onto this, and they also really helped us out.
When talking about Euroscene 2020, you had lots of international guests in the jury, former Eurovision participants. How did you come up with so many popular names? Who brought all these former Eurovision participants?
I can give you one word, actually two words. The first one is stalking. We literally stalked these people, and almost, yeah, was like felt like that sometimes. And the other one was that we had two very passionate guys on our team. That was Joel and Günther, and you saw them as well on Eurostream 2020. They hosted the qualifier reveal in the semifinals, and also they opened the contest in the grand final. And they were literally writing everyone they thought would be available to giving the points, and that included just going onto their Instagram page and just writing, "Hey, we're doing this," or to the Facebook page if you didn't have emails or whatever. And then also Songfestival.be was also very instrumental in filling in the rest of the names. And myself wasn't really involved in that thing, but I could see that they put in a lot of effort to get everyone on board.
So talking about Songfestival.be, Euroscene 2020 is the fan poll, let's say, that has the best ranking for Belgium.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So was there a kind of voting bias included in that?
Yes, and I would also put that maybe a bit at the how would I say it? It's also part where we, I think, fell short in getting enough partners involved. For instance, we didn't have any from the German language. Let me just rephrase it. I don't know if you're is this one bit, or are you going to cut this as well, or are you editing this?
This just feel free.
It's a free form. It's a free form. Okay, so I'll just continue then. No, so bias. There was a bit of bias, and that's also partly due to the fact that there was a bit of a shortfall in certain, let's say, Eurovision language markets. For instance, we didn't have any partner website from the German-speaking countries or the Scandinavians, and I would have liked to have someone from Poland, the Eurovision websites from Poland, but we didn't have the contacts, and getting to them was quite difficult and not always clear who we needed to talk to in that regard. So yeah, there was a bit of a bias in the Dutch-speaking countries. I think we had 2 or 3, maybe 4 even, of the partners who are from a Dutch-speaking community. And also the links at Songfestival.be is that they do have contacts with the national broadcaster VRT, and they just sent out a press release. But we also sent out press releases to other broadcasters. It's just them that actually made something with it, did something with it. So the bias is not on our part. The bias is very much on the press side.
Yeah, well, but of course, the press release seemed to be very successful, because if I see that more than 47,000 people voted in Eurostream 2020, this is quite a big amount. So what impression do you have? Did Eurostream leave a big impact among the fan community in Europe?
It depends. It depends. For some, it was a lovely 3 lovely nights out, especially the last one, were lovely nights out, just like getting away from things and having the Eurovision experience with qualifiers and draws and everything. I don't think it's that important. I just think it did exactly what it set out to be, is like some entertainment. Which was needed in the time we are in right now. The impact, it did show that you can actually do the impact is that it showed that you can actually produce something that looks and feels like the big thing on a very, very much smaller base of means and time than you would normally have. That would be the impact for me, actually.
So what about Eurostream 2021? Do we need a Eurostream if the regular Eurovision is going to take place in Rotterdam next year?
I would hope not. Personally, I think the story has been told, and I think myself as a fan, I'm looking very, very much forward to just going as a fan journalist or a technical journalist or whatever to the big Eurovision. For me personally, it does still itch to go and have a look at behind the scenes, because even us as journalists, we do get a little bit of a lift of the veil, but we don't actually get to see how it actually really gets to work. And the legacy of this one-off thing, we could try to organize something, but at this point in time, I would feel really awkward if it was still called Eurostream, because for me that's a one-off thing.
So this one-off thing maybe is the basis for a future stronger collaboration among the websites that took part in Eurostream?
I would say there was certainly an appetite, and if I see that we had 2 Spanish websites who normally also don't work together, also working together for this case, and bringing us simultaneous commentary when we were doing our live stream, and the same with the Russians. I think that was kind of actually a nice thing to feel that you're part of something larger and international, and that was really nice. And I think there were bridges built during Eurostream that can be used for future projects, certainly.
Personally, why do you think so many websites, blogs are just working for themselves and don't look out to other Eurovision fans to do common projects?
I don't think it's on purpose. I think it's just very difficult enough to manage a group of volunteers who are then, by the very definition of a volunteer, are doing it in their free time, and then also having the added challenge and energy expense of having also to be diplomatic with another partner, it's getting very complicated very quickly. So I think that's the main reason. I think that for the most part, bigger websites are like, yeah, we're fine. We have enough people to do what we want to do, without then also having to take into account the wants and needs of a second or third party. And also, it's already complicated enough because you're working within the confines of what is allowed by EBU and what is not allowed by EBU. They allow very much, you have to say, but yeah, you do have to work within those confines as well.
Did you feel some kinds of issues concerning intercultural communication?
Not really. I'm trying to think of something, but actually no. It was all very in that regard, it was very smooth. What we did experience was that some of the partners, we were hoping that they were going to be wanting to be more visibly involved, and some of them said, no, we're just fine, just like morally supporting it and not like actively supporting it. And I think if there was going to be a second edition of some sorts, then that would be one point where there would be more of an outline, more expression of what our expectations are and what their expectations are in that regard.
So let's think we are in 2030. When you're looking back to Eurostream 2020, what will you keep in mind in the negative way and in a positive way?
Good Lord. I'm gonna keep I will always be laughing out loud at the absurdity that we were on so many national broadcast TV news or broadcasts in general. We were on Icelandic television. We were on Dutch television. That was really crazy. It was like unexpected. And negatively, well, we just learned lessons, and I think that's not negative. We just took on this very crazy, ambitious project, and somehow kind of managed to fulfill it. And that's something I will always be proud. And yes, there were not things that went like we would have liked them to go, but we learned, and we will take that along to another project as well.
Okay, that sounds like either Eurostream or any other project 2021. We're looking forward to it. And thank you very much, Paul, for being with us and sharing your experiences with Eurostream with our viewers of the Eurovision's Conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and good luck with the conference.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, after this wonderful interview with Paul Lashmana, we already have some questions from our viewers. And Harry was asking which were our favorite songs for Eurovision Song Contest 2021. So, okay, Harry, my favorite is the Belgian song. But I think that between Irving, Carla, and Sophia, the odds are going to, I think, Irving, Lithuania, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. And Carla, I think that you mentioned Iceland. And so did Sophia. Okay, so mine is the Bell song, yeah? Song from Belgium. And Irving, Lithuania, Sophia, and Carla go for Iceland. Okay, so, and now we're going to have a special moment right next. And our next guest is Joana Martins. Now, Joana is the manager of the web projects in the Portuguese National Broadcast, RTP. She has been following the Portuguese delegation in the Eurovision Song Contest for the last 3 years, and she will hopefully be in Rotterdam next year too. So let's hear our interview with Joana.
Welcome, Joana.
Welcome, Joana. Yes.
Joana Martins is the manager of web projects in Portuguese National Broadcaster, RTP. She has been working in the production of web contents for the national selection. She's also worked in the Eurovision in Lisbon, producing web contents, and she has been following the Portuguese delegation in the Eurovision Song Contest for the last 3 years. So
everything's correct. Yes.
Good.
Good presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a good start.
Yes.
We know that you have been working for the Portuguese broadcaster for the last 10 years. Before this, did you ever watch the Eurovision Song Contest? Were you a fan?
So I have a little bit of history with the national selection because my uncle was part of the 1985 national selection.
Really?
Yeah, he sang this song called Mam Quer, which had Wanda Stewart as back vocal. Yeah. At the time, she wasn't Wanda Stewart. She had another name. But he was in that selection. He didn't win. I don't know who won by heart
1985, I don't, it was Adelaide Ferreira, I think.
Yeah. I think
I was in that one too. I was in that national selection too.
Of course you were. Of course you were.
Yeah, but I was doing backing vocals to Adelaide, you know.
Oh, okay. So you won.
She won, and I won too. Okay.
So I wasn't born yet in 1985. I was born in 1987.
Oh, gosh.
But my family always had this connection with the national selection, Festival da Canção, because of this. Because my uncle always sang for all the family. I had this grandfather that used to play cavaquinho. So we were like this family that liked to sing.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Mal quer sim ou não? Was that the song?
No,
I know your uncle. I know your uncle.
You know my uncle, yeah.
Yeah.
Manuel Loureiro. Yeah.
Exactly. It's because we're talking about a trio, right? And he's a guy, right?
Yeah. He was 16 at the time. He was.
Yeah, I mean, I did backing vocals in the recording studio with them. You know,
Really?
I remember Wanda Stewart being 16 years old. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I know him. Gosh.
So you see, when I was
exactly.
born, Festival da Canção was already in my family, our family blood. So, and we always watched Festival da Canção because it's like my father used to work for RTP, so it was like this brand that was really in our hearts because it was part of RTP, and it's the oldest show alive on RTP. So I think we always watch it, even when the songs weren't what we would like at the time. We always watch it, and I like a lot the Eurovision concept because it's a really huge show that has all this investment behind it with all the sponsors, but also it's like a really big show that wants to use the last technological equipment. And I think I always wanted to watch Eurovision, even at the years where we were not present, because it's a really a light show, and it's really a show that everyone should watch if you like television, of course, because it has like all this power, all this thinking behind it, all these concepts behind every song, and behind the show, behind the slogan of the show, behind the country that has to host the show at that year. So I think it's I used to watch it, but I always wanted to go there to see what was behind all these crazy things that were happening there. So when I went to RTP, I started working with the Facebook page of Festival da Canção in 2011. and at the time it was only Facebook. And so I started to acknowledge what kind of audience it had on social media. And with time, I got used to talk to these people. It's always almost the same people, because they are really, really, really big fans. So it's like a family, but it's a very how do you say, they always want more.
Oh yeah,
they
demanding. They are
yeah,
demanding.
very
Yes.
demanding. Yeah, because they like the show. They like the national selection. They absolutely love the Eurovision, like the international format. But they always want more. They always demand that you show them things that they want to see ever since they were born, because they know everything about Eurovision.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe you should ask me some questions, because I start talking and I never stop.
That's great. That's great. We have a number of questions to ask you. So, okay. So now let's get more into your work, your function in the national broadcaster RTP. So, what do you think is the RTP social media strategy for the national selection, as well as the Eurovision Song Contest? What do you think are the strategies involved in these two events? First, the national selection, and then the Eurovision.
Okay, so I think the national selection, when I got hold of the Facebook page, there wasn't a strategy. At the time, I wasn't allowed to show anything. I couldn't show the songs, the stage, the costumes. I couldn't show anything. Yeah, I couldn't show anything, because the person that was responsible for the brand at the time, I think it was he didn't want to show all that was happening behind the scenes until the show was aired. Okay, so it was really, really difficult to do content at the time, because how can I talk about this if I can't talk about this?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, because social media, you need to feed people with content every day, or at least every week. Because it's the only platform where people they feel that they can contribute with their suggestions.
Yes.
So you need
opinions and suggestions and everything.
Yeah. So at the time, I had nothing to show.
Yeah.
I started to have something to show at the year, I think it was when Homens da Luta won. Because there was this new way of selection. We had all the songs in a platform, in an online platform, and the audience could vote for the songs, and those songs would be on the show. So at that year, I could do something more. I could talk with all the artists, all the performers, and I made some interviews with them, and it was really cool. But then I think we shut down that option again. Okay. So in 2017, when this new format of national selection of Festival da Canção that we have emerged, then I was like contact. There was a more formal contact with me, like this. We have to do this a cool thing again. We have to make Festival da Canção cool again. So exactly. we need social media, because social media is cool. So we I have a lot of other brands that I have to work with, and I was really afraid that I didn't have the time to make content for Festival da Canção, because I know that the audience is so demanding, and I would like to make videos and interviews, and I was always it was always only me that was working all this. doing the videos, the interviews, everything, editing all the videos. So I was really afraid that if I had another social platform added to the Facebook one, that I couldn't do everything that I wanted to do. But then 2017 happened and Salvador Sobral happened. And I was like, now, this is the jewel of the crown now.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. Now, yeah. So I think, okay, Instagram is really hyping right now.
Yeah.
So I have to make an Instagram first of all. Yeah. So the strategy was this. My strategy when I started working with all the social media for Festival da Canção was, we have all this audience, we have all this public that would love to get give us suggestions. So we have to talk to them, even if they sometimes are not very nice people. Sometimes they are not very nice people. Yeah. And sometimes me and all the production team, we are trying our best, and they are not very nice because they don't know. They are not on the backstage of things. So,
exactly.
So my strategy, as the time went by, I started to be less a brand and more a person. So Joanna, this person, was talking to them, and she was the medium through which they could talk with the brand.
Yes.
So I think that was the new strategy. It was, I'm hearing you. I know what you want. Sometimes I just can't give it to you.
Sure. Exactly.
And I think that facilitated my job, made it much easier, because yes, they are not nice at times. But when they do meet me, it's not, they have another approach. It's much more like, thank you for your
effort,
what you do. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for your effort. We know that you do everything that we ask you to, and you can do more. So thank you. Even when we are not nice people, they say this to me. We know that we are not nice people. We're not easy people. I know. It's so funny.
Yeah, because they like the Eurovision Song Contest so much, and the national selection, and they take it so personally and so seriously that maybe they become, well, demanding in that sense. But it's not because it's a bad thing, it's because they feel it so overwhelmingly, I don't know, personally.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So. Oh,
this is my dog.
Good. Mine attacked me, a couple of interviews ago.
You have to. Tens que levar, senão ele vai ladrar.
No, you can leave it there.
Okay. Yes. I think he's going to shut up
now. Okay. So let's move on, Sofia.
So you talked this important question about the interaction between not the brand as a not the personal image of the television, but this personal interaction between you and the fans, and all. We are talking about the fans, but we are actually talking about the whole audience that could interact with you. So what is the feedback of this different way of communicate between the RTP via Joanna and this community?
Well, I think that they feel that someone is listening. Because when you're a brand and you are representing like this massive brand, which is RTP, sometimes you have to give just straight answers that are very, sometimes it's like they're very cold. And because of this audience, these fans, they feel it so much in their hearts. When you answer them with so much it's almost like you are an arrogant brand. you don't care about what the people that are watching the show think about your show. And I think, but it's not true. We know that it's not true. We have a production team that is very well they feel this as a personal thing also. Festival da Canção is like this brand that is theirs. They're a very close team, and they decide everything together, and it's like five-person team. So they feel it in like if it's part of their journey in each year. But I felt that the fans were always answering the brand with this arrogance, because they felt that the first approach of the brand was always arrogant. So when this person that is Joana, that's me, but I feel like Joana is another person, you know, it's part of this strategy. When they write me and they say, could you please show us the stage? I can answer them and say, I don't know, let me try. If I was the brand, I couldn't say to them, I don't know, let me try.
You would say no.
No.
Exactly.
Because I wouldn't have an answer. Like it was no. It wouldn't be no because me, the brand, I'm justifying myself. No, me as Joana, I can't say that. The brand can't say that. So I think it built a healthier relationship with the brand with the audience.
Exactly. Yeah,
and I have a good feedback, even when they are mean to me. To me as a person, sometimes they're mean to me, but I don't get it very personal.
You don't take it personally anymore. No. Yes, of course. Yeah, because that was what our next question was about. You know, the fact that your work brings the audiences closer to the artists and the television stuff. In other words, the brand. You know, the RTP. So I will be moving on to the next one, which is every year the Eurovision Song Contest brings together people who gather live for this purpose. However, the Eurovision has the capacity to gather people through the digital platforms, as we have seen this year, even more than in other years. So, Joana, what do you think is the importance of the articulation between these two dimensions, the live and the web? You know, you mean, on the one side you have the live event, the live meeting of people, and on the other you have this enormous community of people who gather through the digital platforms, as we've seen this year, I think particularly.
Yeah. Well, I think that this year was a very special year because the social media team and the online team of Eurovision Song Contest tried to give this sense of community again in the internet. But I think that they tried to do two things in one that didn't achieve the purpose that they were searching for. I don't know, because on the online part, the online platforms, I think that the goal of the online platforms for Eurovision Song Contest is to show the audience that there is this person behind each song. So that's the goal of the social media of Eurovision Song Contest. So this year, they tried to make these three shows. The Eurovision Song Celebration, and then the Shine Light. Yeah, and they tried to put on a show that was this. Let's get to know every artist that would participate in this event, but not, and show the audience some part of the music. And I think Eurovision Song Contest, when you see it, when we watch it on TV, it's about the music, and social media is about the artists. So, and there are a lot of artists that are very charismatic. Then when you know them, but the song is not so good. But sometimes when the fans know them on the spot, they fell in love with the artist, and then
exactly.
The artist is all over the top charts, and because the artist is so charismatic, but the song is not so good, but the artist is so nice.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So I think that this year it was a little bit confusing to watch these 3 shows, because it was not about the music, it was not about the artist, it was a little bit about the music and a little bit about the artist, a little bit about the message of the artists. That was they were always about the same thing, because COVID-19.
Exactly.
And I think it was really confusing, in my opinion.
It's very interesting, because we have been gathering different opinions about what you were discussing just now. You know, some people think that it was a sad event. I mean, it didn't have the joy that usually the Eurovision Song Contest involves. And other people have told us that it was a nice TV show, and I would tend to agree. I thought it was well produced, nice. But on the other hand, listening to what you're just saying now, and to what 2 other people testified, people who have been inside the Eurovision Song Contest in the last years, I understand their point of view, your point of view, and other interviewees' point of view, when they say that it was kind of, they didn't have that joy, or it wasn't about the artist, or it wasn't about the song, it was a little bit of a mixture.
Yeah, so it seems to, if you try to gather all these dimensions of music, because it's a competition between songs, but also this dynamic that is always move the event through the year. So for you, that you manage the social media all over the year, not only in this week of Eurovision, which is the importance of this dynamic, as you say, a kind of daily basis dynamic during the whole year, to continue the format, to continue the life of this show. So can you talk a little bit about this?
Okay. Because I'm like this one-woman show, I don't have all the time that I wanted to have to make content all year long. This year I tried to make this weekly show called Sem Filtro, that talked about other national selections, and it was my way of giving all the fans something to look forward to until the day that we would have our Festival da Canção, our winner. And then when my goal was to make all these 14 weekly shows. Every Wednesday I had this hour about Eurovision of Festival da Canção. And when we got our winners, I would stop, and then I would resume when we went to the Rotterdam 2020. So this didn't happen. We didn't go. But what I was trying to give them in this 14 shows was this sense of community, because what I felt last year, in 2018, when it was last year, 2 years ago, was that when Eurovision ended in Lisbon, that people were really sad. People were really sad because they didn't have nothing more to talk about, because Eurovision was over. So last year when we went to Tel Aviv, I didn't do this because I'm, again, one person. So, and I'm always asking people for favors. So can you please just record me with this person that I want to interview, and then you just have to hold the camera. Then I'll editing and I will publish it, and I will, yeah. So I'm this person. I'm always asking favors from my friends. Yeah. So, but this year I wanted to give them something more. So I did all this content to make them more interested in what we were doing as RTP and in what other countries were doing, because there are a lot of websites in which people can read about Eurovision and all the national selections abroad, but sometimes people don't want to go on those websites because they don't know the people that are writing about it. So I thought, well, if RTP could make something. RTP is a brand that they know, in which they have some trust. They have trust, yeah. So I made these videos, and I felt that older people that are on Facebook, on Festival da Canção Facebook, they were, oh, I didn't know this about Denmark. I didn't know this about Hungary. So they felt closer to all the other national selections through these videos. And I was trying to buy me some time also, because I didn't have a lot of information about Festival da Canção that I could tell them. Yeah. So when I was talking about the other countries, I was also buying me some time to convince people that are in charge of Festival da Canção to tell me something that I could publish.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was my strategy.
Okay, Joana, you traveled several times with the Portuguese delegation, we've said, to the Eurovision host cities. So what is your perception about the dynamics of the people in the host cities? What happens to a city that's hosting a Eurovision Song Contest, from your experience?
What happened to the city?
Yeah, well, you've been, from my knowledge, you've been in Kiev, right?
Yeah.
And then you've been in Lisbon, right?
Lisbon and Tel Aviv.
Sure. And in Tel Aviv. Okay, so
yeah.
3 very different cities, I imagine. So what is your perception of this this thing that happens in the cities along the Eurovision Song Festival? Or you don't have any time to...
I don't have any time to see the city almost. We are always working. I feel that we are always in the arenas, in the venues. We are always in the bubble. It's like...
So that's an answer, okay.
Yeah, we are always... I don't see much of the city. It's so sad. When we were in Tel Aviv in the 2019 with Conan, I had like... we couldn't make it to the final, so we had like these 3 days. So they told me so they told me, well, you will not post content now because people will think that we are here in holiday.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, yeah, it's sad. But people were asking me because they wanted to know if Conan was all right, if the delegation was all right, if people were very sad or not. But I was like, no, so they said to me that I can post it, so I won't post it anything. So I was so it was really strange to me to have like these 3 days to see things.
Yeah.
Now you can see things, you can watch what's happening.
Exactly, yeah.
But I think it's every people has its way to deal with strangers.
Sure.
And on Kiev, I felt there was a really huge investment in the event. Even I was really afraid that they didn't have internet. This is a true.
Yeah, sure.
True.
For you, it's an issue, of course. Yes.
Yes. But yeah, but that was fine.
Good.
Internet was fine in Kiev, and I think in Tel Aviv they were a little bit more I wouldn't say suspicious, but they were always looking at you and like really watching what you were doing.
Yeah.
And if you were respectful with their religion, because they are
Oh,
religious
exactly,
countries.
yeah.
So I felt a little bit of I felt the country in Tel Aviv as I didn't felt the country in Kiev.
Okay. Yeah.
Because they were very religious and nationalist persons. So you could feel the country.
Felt that, yeah.
Yeah, you could feel the country.
Not so much in Kiev, right?
No. Kiev, but I was just 1 week in Kiev. I'm sorry. in Kiev, as in Lisbon, you felt that you were welcome as a foreigner to be in their country. They wanted to know you. In Lisbon's case, we wanted to welcome people to our country, to our city. But that's what we are, Portuguese people. We are like this. We have this way of treating foreigners, as in my point of view. Yes. But in Tel Aviv, it was much more like they were always measuring what were your intentions towards their country or towards what their religion. So it wasn't I didn't felt quite well there, but I didn't feel insecure at all. At all. It was really nice, and that's. But I would love to feel more of the people of the country, and I think that Eurovision has to be about the country. That's what I'm always telling this to the fans, Festival da Canção fans, when we talk about Eurovision. I feel that sometimes all the songs sound the same because the countries, they're not making songs that represent their country. They're making songs to win.
Exactly.
And I think sometimes it's like, I need to feel your country in your song, because if I don't, I'll just hear some radio. I would listen to the radio, because all the songs are the same. They always come from North America, and I feel that the songs are becoming so similar to one another that it has lost the magic sometimes.
Yeah. So you have been pointing some interesting stuff about these communities of people that are fans of the RTP Song Contest and also the Eurovision Song Contest. Many of them travel to the host cities. It's kind of a big family. A previous interview told us about this Christmas dinner that Eurovision could be. So you felt that this cancellation of this year event maybe triggered more these virtual dynamics, or not?
No. If I'm being honest, I felt that people were so sad. They were just sad. They wait for this all year long. When they know what will be the city for the next year competition, they buy the tickets. If they can, they buy the ticket at that point in time. We had like this 1 year gap to breathe, and they are always buying the ticket the next minute when they know which is the winner. So I felt that they were really, really sad, and I was reading about the EBU's decision of this year's songs will not be in the next year competition, and I was like, yeah, this is nice, because I think that we need new songs to make a new hype about next year's event. Because we can't be stuck in these songs, even if it was so unfair that people that won all the national selections didn't get to compete in the Eurovision Song Contest. I think that we need new songs for the next year edition to make the hype grow again, to make people happy again, because they need to talk about this. They need to know all the new artists, all the new songs, all the new events that are going to be held prior to the national selections and during the national selections. They need to hope for something, and I think that this year, well, they can't talk to each other. But it's so they can't see each other. There are these groups of people that one is from Israel, the other one is from Switzerland, the other one is from Cyprus, and they all get together in this country that is the host country of that year. And this year they didn't have this, and they couldn't meet anywhere because no one is allowed to travel. So it's like a sad moment. It's like, it's when you feel that people really live in separate countries. Although the internet is so good, having this connection, this close connection, it's not the same. And I feel that people were a little bit sad about this.
Sometimes I compare this kind of cyclical time, such as religious time, not in the bad sense, but you know that in May you have the Eurovision, and then you have this post-Eurovision depression time, and then in September it begins again to choose the entries, and this is a kind. It's always
it's a cycle.
Exactly. So I felt this is important also for the fans. And also
audiences.
Exactly. Even people that he's not assuming as a fan, but that know in May we have this competition, and also the Portuguese national selection, that many people in Portugal have this kind of emotional link to this. So I don't know if you want to do a kind of wrap up about these big dynamics of fans and audiences and
your work. What do you expect for the next year's Eurovision Song Contest, if there will be one? We are sure there will be one, but we don't know in which format it will be constructed. So do you have any specific expectations, Joanna? What are your thoughts about this?
I don't know. It will be my first Eurovision Song Contest in Central Europe, because I was always I do the Junior Eurovision Song Contest too, and it's always on that part of the world.
Exactly.
If you're watching me for
far away, very far away.
It's really far away. I was in Georgia. I was in where did I go last year? Poland? I was in Poland. I was in Poland. So it's a little bit closer. But I was in Kiev, in Ukraine. So it was always far from home. And now Rotterdam seemed nice. So
very near.
Very near. We don't have to fly like this 7-hour flight. So I'm expecting a lot from the Rotterdam edition, because I know that the Netherlands haven't won for a lot of time. So I think that they will be just as pumped as we were when we won. So I'm expecting. We always have a very nice relationship with the Netherlands delegation. In the Junior Eurovision, we are always with them, because the P from Portugal is very near to the T from the Netherlands, so we are always with them, and they are really cool. So I think it's going to be a huge party, because people are in rehab right now, because they really miss Eurovision. So I think that next year it will be just crazy, I think, because the audience it's like really thirsty of Eurovision.
Let's hope so. Crazy in the best of the senses. Yes, okay. So Joanna, thank you very much. It was really interesting.
Thank you.
And we hope to see you sometime soon. Much sooner than in Rotterdam in 2021. And you're obviously invited to be in the roundtables of Eurovisions.
Thank you.
Interact with us.
Yes, exactly.
As people
Please.
interact with you.
Please.
Okay.
Please.
If you answer me back, I will always talk to you. That's my goal.
Yeah.
When people answer me back, you have me. Yeah.
Thank you, Joanna.
Okay,
Thank you.
we'll bear that in mind. Thank you, Joanna.
Yeah, this was a very interesting insight from the other side of the social media fence that is sometimes separating the TV broadcasters and the fans, but always tries to keep in touch. So we were talking about the post-Eurovision depression, about the grief that many fans experience because of the cancellation, and one fan is especially grieving because she uses to be among the volunteers of the Eurovision Song Contest, and this year for the very first time she had the chance to be the host of the German delegation, and now the contest is cancelled. But she will tell us her story, so very welcome, Henrike Hören. So our next guest is Henrike Hören from Germany. Hello, Henrike. Thank you for being with us. So you are a big Eurovision fan since when?
It started when I was 12 and now I'm 30, so 18 years ago. I watched it with my family, and then I worked for the Eurovision when it was in Vienna. So, and that only made my love go even bigger because I met all of the fans and I worked behind the scenes. And ever since then, I've been there on scene, except for Tel Aviv, but I've been there every year. Yeah.
So how come that a German girl decides to work for Eurovision and to travel around the world to be there?
Well, it's a very big experience. I like that I don't know where I'm going to go next year. It's always my vacation is what Eurovision is going to be. It could be Kiev, it could be Azerbaijan. So the winner is going to be my vacation, which makes me very excited. And also I feel like, I mean, you know that, Irving, when you are there, you meet almost the same people every time again. It's like you come there into a big family and you meet them again, you say hey, and they're from all over the world, and you talk to them about music, and it's a very peaceful thing. It's not like football or soccer where you have different competing teams and everyone hates each other, but it's very much peaceful. You talk about music and it's party, and it's just a great experience, I think. Yeah.
So this big family meeting this year couldn't take place due to the COVID-19 crisis. How did you live these very crucial moments for every Eurovision fan?
Well, I think I prepared my heart because I knew in March, April, February that it's going to be almost impossible. So you prepare your heart a little bit that it's going to happen. But of course, when the news came, it was so sad. It was so sad. I know that there are bigger problems in the world, but if you're a big Eurovision fan, it feels like it's so sad. But yeah, you make the best of it. I celebrated with my family for the first time in years, I think. I was on the couch with them and we looked through, I made a YouTube playlist and I showed them this year's entries. And actually it was kind of nice because I could show my love for Eurovision to them, which I usually can't because I'm always away when Eurovision is. So it was a very different experience being on the couch, but it's also okay. But I hope, of course, next year this is just a one-time thing and then we can do our normal things again.
So you organized kind of your own private Eurovision Song Contest, and your family had to vote too?
Yes, we did a very, I was like Petra Urban, the German commentator. So I tried to give like a small speech before every entry and tell them a little bit about how old the contestant is and where he came from. And I picked 25 entries. So I looked at the betting odds. So I did the 25 highest rating entries I picked. So like it was like a normal final. And they also had to give votes, and then each of them picked like a country. My dad was Iceland, and then I said, okay, now we're going to go to Iceland. Can you please present the points? But then he gave 12 points to Iceland, so it didn't make a lot of sense but anyway, it was like a lot of fun, and Iceland won in our family game. But yeah, it was good.
How did it feel for you to share your love for Eurovision with your family that normally maybe is not so fond of your hobby?
Well, I think my family is appreciative. I have friends that are less appreciative, but my family is like neutral to liking it, I think. And just seeing their reactions to some songs, like you know the songs, I know the songs, we know the songs way beforehand. I've listened to them 20 billion times, but then seeing their reaction for the first time to Iceland, for example, or to Lithuania, it's just nice to see like some people that don't know the songs, to just see how they react naturally to a song was great.
So this year that you couldn't go to Rotterdam is particularly sad because you were, for the first time, you had the chance to do a particular task. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. I even brought, so you believe me, I brought like my Eurovision badge that I already got. We got better ones, but I don't know if you can see it. I was supposed to be the delegation host for Germany this year, which is basically the highest volunteer task you can do in the volunteer world. There are lots of different volunteer tasks that you can do in the press center, or you can be at the events, but there's also a very small group of volunteers that are, every country has 2 of them, and they guide them around and help them, are at the rehearsals. And yeah, it's a very demanded job. Everyone wants to do it. So I didn't have the chance yet to get the job, but this year it is in Rotterdam, and I've lived there for 6 years. So I thought, okay, I have a good chance, I can try it. And I've been through 3 selection rounds, so it was a lot of months. Been through 3 selection rounds, and in the end I got the job, and I also got Germany, because we could tell which country we like, which was nice. So I was supposed to help Ben find the city around, to help him get food that he likes. I don't know. They told us every country has different demands, but I think he would be very chill. But yeah, I would have done everything for him. But yeah, and then if I have a good chance, I can do it next year again. So I hope that it doesn't go away, and next year I can help the German artists, whoever there will be, again.
So many fans spend their holidays, in fact, at Eurovision, but not many work in that time. I mean, you go to abroad to do sightseeing, enjoy the parties, but you, in fact, you have to work all day. So what makes you pick this particular way of being a fan?
Well, yeah, I think it's a special sort of fan that you need to be. I remember I was in the taxi to Ahoy to go to the selection round in Rotterdam, and I tried to explain the taxi driver that I was going to this selection interview, and that I was not going to be paid, and I had to pay my own food and everything. And he was like, "Why are you doing this? This sounds like not like a great thing." And I said, "No, there's lots of people that want to do it." And he said, "I don't understand this Eurovision thing, that you work for free." And I really try to explain him that I think you get invaluable experiences that as a fan you usually will never ever get. I remember in Vienna I worked for the first time, and I had the chance, when I had off days, I could just be in the hall when there were the rehearsals, and I could see how they were practicing all of the lights and all of the television. I could just be there, and I was so happy. I cried because it was just so emotional, and we could go on stage and help a little bit with the production there. And now with helping Ben, I think it's a very, very intense time, and you can go into the rehearsals with him, and you can see the sound checks. And I think it's the closest as a fan you can come to being an artist, really. And that is, I think there's no money that you can do it with, even though it's a lot of hours. It's usually you work 12 hours every day. 10, 12 hours is normal. You don't sleep. It's really a lot, but I would do it every year again if I could. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about this special world of the volunteers. It seems to me that there are, compared to the fans that are in the press center and working for the various blogs and websites, that there are more women there. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I think so too. There are more women, and you in general have a lot of different areas that you can work in. You go to a selection interview and you can pick a few areas that you're interested in, but it's not guaranteed that you get the job that you like. So you have the jobs at the press area where you can help with conferences and help with the press materials. You have the people that work in the hall themselves, and you have people that work at the outside and guide people around. So it's a very diverse thing, and especially here in Rotterdam, it was crazy because there were so many older people as well. Usually in the other cities I worked in, so I worked in Lisbon and in Vienna, there were very young people, 18 to 30, I would say. But in Rotterdam, there were a lot of volunteers that were older, which I like, because I think it's also diversity. You don't have to be young to help. So it's a very diverse group, and not everyone is a fan. Like, actually, we as fans, we are the small group. Like, we are we are not the big community. Usually it's people that live in the city themselves and they just want to help because they live in Rotterdam and they heard about Eurovision and they just feel like they have time, or they're students. So some people don't even know what Eurovision is, even though they are volunteers, which I think is nice. It's okay. So sometimes I explain to them what it is. And they even told us this year that they are very careful sometimes to pick fans, because it's you have to find a balance if you're a fan of working and being a fan. I mean, you can't really go after every artist and say, I want an autograph or anything, because then it's not professional. So you have to be careful that you are still an employee, basically, at Eurovision then.
Mm. But however, you are a very big Eurovision fan, of course. If you compare yourself to the male fans in the press center, do you see that there are any differences in the approach, in the way that they are fan and you are fan?
Let me think. I think, I don't know why that is. There are definitely less female fans. I don't know if you would be with me on that. I think there are more male fans in general. So as a woman, you are a little bit more alone. And if you meet another woman, you're like, oh, she's a fan too. I think the male fans sometimes are maybe more enthusiastic with their clothes and everything. It's usually some people dress very out there and wear crazy costumes and do that. And I don't know many females that do that, I think. Even though my friend Kate, she makes her own costumes. So I know women that do it. But I would be happy if there are more females that want to join the fan groups. I mean, we are here, and I'm happy to have them.
Mm. You are working in healthcare, but in elderly care, in fact.
Yeah.
So for you, is it difficult to save so much holiday for Eurovision, and what kind of financial effort does it mean to you?
Definitely, it's a big financial effort that you do. It's the flights, it's the accommodation. I'm usually there for 2 weeks, so it's a 2-week accommodation you pay. And of course, I have a very, in elderly care, I have a very exhausting job sometimes. So I do have sometimes the emotion that I want to lay down at the beach. And if I'm at Eurovision, it's more of an action thing, and I work and I come home and I'm usually a little bit sick and I want to sleep for 3 days. So my boss knows when I come home, I'm usually the first 2 days, I just need to sleep a lot to get my sleep back. But it's all worth it. I mean, the tickets are expensive, but the good thing as a volunteer is that you usually don't need tickets because you get either free tickets or you don't have time to really see the shows because you work. So that is the part that you can, if you are a volunteer, I don't think you need tickets. I wouldn't buy them if I'm a volunteer. Actually, this year I had tickets and I sold them because I don't think I could have needed them. So it's a lot, yeah, financial, emotionally exhausting, but it's still very much worth it.
So this year you did a private Eurovision with your family. What other activities did you do to cope with the lack of real Eurovision experience?
Well, I had a few Zoom parties with the fan club, and I also had a Zoom party with a friend of mine who is in an American fan club, and we voted the songs and did our own little contest as well via Zoom, which was nice, which is something. I listen to the songs a lot, but it makes me emotional as well because, you know, the songs will never get the chance to be heard. And I think I just talked to my friends, and we are all in the same boat this year. We have to go through this, I guess.
Well, let's look into the future. We are in 2030 and you look back to 2020. What will be the strongest memory you will keep from this year?
Oh, wow. I think Corona is probably going to be a big thing that is in my mind. Not having the Eurovision. I'm going to have a baby in November, so I think it's going to be, that is in my mind probably when I think back to 2020. Yeah, I think those are the three things.
So, and you will take your baby to Rotterdam next year as a delegation host?
Yeah, it's the first thing when I found out. I told my boyfriend, I said, okay, whatever happens, we need to get this baby like grown up until like May next year because I will have to work. So it will have to be independent by that time. So it's Eurovision before baby. No, it's not, but it's for sure the baby is gonna come next year.
Yeah. Okay, I see that we are going to have a new Eurovision fan soon.
yes, it's listening already in my belly to a lot of songs, so it will probably hear them through me singing them a lot. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much. We are looking forward to meet you both in Rotterdam next year.
Thank you.
And well, enjoy the rest of the conference. I hope you will find some more interesting interviews and the discussion about the various topics that we are addressing today and on the other days of the conference. Thank you so much, Henrike.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So the young Eurovision fans are about to come. Henrike is creating one of them. So we're looking forward to meet her and her baby next year in Rotterdam. So we had 4 very interesting interviews, but quite a long time focused on the screen. So now it's time for our interval act in the second semi-final. And again, we have the chance to have the wonderful art of Korjun accompanying us with a recap of the second semi-final of this year's Eurovision Song Contest that unfortunately could not take place in Rotterdam. So now enjoy Korjun's recap, and we are going to prepare our roundtable discussion with very interesting guests. You have the chance to ask your questions now. So see you in 5 minutes.
Sebastian.
Yeah, great band.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kojun, for this recap of the second semi-final of the Eurovision Song Contest 2020. And now we are back for our round table, and we have two very interesting guests that Carla is going to introduce to you.
Hello again. So yes, we have our second round table of this series of Eurovision's 2020. And with us today, we have Nuno Galopin and Dave Gensen. So Nuno Galopin is a journalist, radio host, and an author. He started working on radio and writing in newspapers in 1989. He is the author of several documentaries for television, and he works also for RTP, the Portuguese national broadcaster, for the Portuguese national selection, and also for the Eurovision Song Contest since 2016. He is also the author of Eurovision, From ABBA to Salvador Sobral, a book that was published in 2018, and as far as I know, still only available in Portuguese. But who knows, maybe in the future we'll have a translation.
Yeah.
And now I'll introduce you also Dave Gensen. Dave Gensen is the project manager of Eurovision Song Contest 2020 and 2021 for Rotterdam. So double the work, but also double the joy. In May 2019, Davy was asked to manage the bidding process to become, for Rotterdam to become the host city. And later on, he also took the role of project manager of the core team. Before the Eurovision really took over all of his life, he was already involved in music, in several events, conferences, and also festivals. He's a lover of live music and vinyl, and he has always followed the Eurovision Song Contest. So to start the questions and picking up here on this note on Dave's biography, so being music lovers and music professionals, how did the Eurovision Song Contest came into your lives? Dave, how did you experience the Eurovision for the first time?
Oh, at first it was a bit unreal. I didn't really understood what happened when I got the assignment. It's a really big honor, and I was really pleased and privileged to take it upon me. And there wasn't much time to think it over and reflect on it. So we just had to dive in deep, and we had a couple of weeks time to get this done. This is the bid book. We had to convince the host broadcaster after Duncan Lawrence won in Tel Aviv that they should really come over to Rotterdam to host the Eurovision Song Contest. So there wasn't much time to think about what is happening in my life, but what did happen is long days, a lot of work, but I also got surrounded by a wonderful team, very talented people at the host city with a lot of energy, people who feel like this is my moment of glory, this is my once in a lifetime event, I'm gonna give my best. And we have only a limited amount of time to do so, but still we're gonna put in a lot of hard work and effort and come up with great ideas and a lot of work. And on the other side, there's the host broadcaster, and many Eurovision fans have seen, 70 million have seen Europe Shine a Light, the alternative TV show. And it's incredible what they did in such a short time. Yes. So you can only be blessed when you're working with people like this surrounding you. And it means a lot for me as a music lover, to come back to your question. It is deep down, it really is about the music. Like exactly the words Duncan Lawrence said, it's music first, of course. There's a lot of glitter, glamour, and crazy stuff going on, but deep down it's artists showing the world what they have in store.
But I wanted to know a little bit before, how you personally experienced the Eurovision before you had been invited. How did the Eurovision came into your life?
It's something you grow up with when you're just young. It's something you watch with your parents, your family. It's a perfect excuse to stay up late when you're really young. And you can really get excited about the scores, the ratings, and it's a competition, so it's big fun. And it's also a bit of, well, a crazy, bizarre circus. I think it was the Belgian artist Hooverphonic, one of the people of the band, who said, like, Eurovision is like a circus. Maybe that's a negative approach, but there's also a positive approach in these words. And a circus can be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it leaves a lot of memories. And how about you, Nuno? I hear that in your case, it was a sort of a baptism of fire.
Literally. I don't know what my oldest Eurovision memory might be, but I know that in 1971, I asked my parents to buy a single of a song that wasn't the winner. So it was my choice, not theirs, because they gave me the Séverine single who won. The song from Monaco, but I asked them to buy me the song from Luxembourg, Pom Pom Pom, by Monique Melson. So
Yes.
I was probably watching Eurovision at 4 years old in 1971. But as far as a vivid memory is concerned, the next year, 1972, we were with my family at a wedding in Castelo de Vida in northern Alentejo, and it was Eurovision day, and that afternoon I felt with my hands in the fireplace, and I injured myself. Minor injuries, don't worry, and everything's okay by now. But I didn't allow my parents to take me to the hospital because it was Eurovision night, and I wanted to see it. And I actually had my hand soaked in some liquid. And I managed to see Vicky Leandros winning with Après Toi, and Carlos Mendes getting a 7th place, which was the best score for Portugal up until José Cid doubled it in 1980.
With the Festa da Vida, right?
Festa da Vida.
Yeah.
And then I saw it as an enthusiast year by year. But in the 90s, I started collecting records. And I still collect Eurovision 7-inch records and CD singles. So if anyone has the Yugoslavian song from 1970, Privida di Bon Svet, I still don't have that one. That's one of the few missing ones. And being a collector, it added my relationship with the history of Eurovision before I was watching it as a kid. Because before the internet, you had very little chances to know what happened before. You might have some magazines, you might have a book, but there were not those many books about Eurovision back then. And so collecting records was a way, and collecting them via mail order, finding people across Europe who sold collections as well and singles. It was a way to build up my Eurovision memories from before I was a kid. And since I started working as a journalist in 1981, Eurovision became something that was part of my professional job when I moved from Blitz, which was a weekly musical newspaper, to a daily newspaper, Diário de Notícias. And then year after year, I started writing about the national final and about Eurovision. And that's when I got some stronger connections with both the singers, the composers, and even people are at RTP. I got to be jury once, or in 1998, and sometime later on. The process went on up until 2016, when I was asked to work with RTP as a commentator, and not much longer after that Eurovision in which Portugal didn't participate, I was asked to a group to discuss the future of Festival da Canção. And so suddenly it became not part of my profession, but probably the main part of my profession ever since.
So we get here the first comments. Harris writing, I beg your pardon, he saw the first ESC back in 1971 and he looks younger than me.
Well, it's a Portuguese weather and the food.
Yeah, sure.
But the food, definitely.
Yes.
So this is, how does a person get the project manager for such an important event? Did you say, hey, it's me, I want to do it, I want to do it?
Well, someone somewhere came up with the idea to ask me to do it, and I do have some experience with bit books, composing bit books, and professional and personal interest in music and events. So, well, it just happened. I was the right person at the right spot eventually, and very grateful. The one person who got the idea that I should be the project manager of this. A couple of months ago, I walked into her. She's not really someone I see very often, but I did thank her for dropping my name.
Of course.
And it's really a great job. If you ever dream about work, well, this is a dream job, absolutely.
Yeah.
But can you explain maybe a little bit, how does a bid book for Eurovision has to look like?
Yeah, you can see it. We want to see it.
No. It looks like this. It's a hardcover. It doesn't have to look like this. It's full of photos and text about actually selling our proposition about how we would do it if the song contest would come to Rotterdam. And actually, it all starts off with the host broadcaster coming up with some demands, and they try to stoke some interest at several cities, and they hope that they come up with a bid to host it. And back in June or July, I think it was at the end. It was 5 cities who actually came up with a bid book, and it was narrowed down at the last stage to 2. It was Maastricht and Rotterdam. It was between those 2 cities. And the contents of the bid book is really about how are you taking care of the logistics, how will you manage the safety of the delegations, how will you manage the media, the press, can you tell us something about the venue? Well, in Rotterdam we have Ahoy, which is a really big venue, well experienced. We had MTV Awards there in 2016. And how will the city manage it? We have a rich tradition in Rotterdam with big festivals and events. We had the Tour de France, the Grand Départ in 2010. And we do have a lot of street parade stuff going on, carnival. So we can handle a big crowd, and we know how to party. And we were really up for it. And one of the things we are most proud of, which was actually really embraced by the EBU and the host broadcaster, that we really wanted to be a Eurovision Song Contest, not just for those who are lucky to have a ticket to enter the venue or at home to watch TV, but we wanted to really make it something of the whole city. Also, people with less money could be welcomed, because we did some kind of lottery for people who have low wages, and we were able to give away 9,000 tickets for several shows to people who really like this but simply cannot afford it. And the second thing is that we were able to get funding by the city council to come up with a side program, a city program, as you like, which ended up in 75 side program activities throughout the whole city. So it's really embraced by theaters, local communities, and all over the town.
Yeah, next year we'll open up.
Yeah.
Open up.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So,
Okay.
Neal, when you were involved with relaunching the Portuguese Festival de Canção, did you think that now Portugal's destiny is in my hands?
No, no, but I think what I really had in mind, not me, but the small core who worked to rebuild the Festival da Canção, which was the very same team who did the concept for Eurovision in Lisbon 2018. It was the exact same team that worked the revamp of for Festival da Canção, and then we did Eurovision. We wanted to make the national selection closer to Portuguese music nowadays. I always say we have to pay respect to those who never let Festival da Canção fade away for all these years. But for many, many years, the songs that were competing were not having a life besides those nights, the nights of the TV shows. And there were so many interesting artists not competing in the national final. Some would be bold enough to go there, but most of them didn't even bother. That might be the word. And what we try to do is to do exactly what was common in Portugal in the 60s and the 70s, to have the key artists and mainly composers being asked to do songs. And we thought that if we have the composers who do the songs that get played on the radio, of artists who get to play on festivals, summer festivals all around the country, and not just people who actually go and compete one night a year for a TV show, we might have a better representation of what Portuguese music might be. And if that is the start of a family of possibilities, maybe the winner can be something interesting and representative of what's happening in Portugal right now. And we were so mega lucky that in the first year, Luisa Sobral, which I knew personally for a while, and I actually had invited her to participate, and she said yes, of course. She brought in her brother, and they are two musicians with a jazz background, and jazz music and fado are probably two of the musical areas that are very, very well represented among Portuguese music today. Of course, we have pop music and hip hop and rock and roll and all those other genres, but jazz and fado are particularly good. Of course, fado is local, but jazz, Portuguese jazz, is very, very good. And we were very lucky to have two jazz musicians winning the national selection and going into Kiev to win Eurovision. That doesn't mean we were reshaping Festival da Canção to produce winners, because that doesn't exist. You cannot produce Eurovision songs thinking they can win, because Lordi, is it a winning song? Verka, is it an almost winning song? You don't know. It depends on the songs you have that year. It depends on the context. It depends on many things. So you cannot have an idea of what an Eurovision song might be. Amar pelos Dois was the most unusual Eurovision song that year. But suddenly it gathers something around the artist and the song that related to people. And that's usually how a song gets to win Eurovision. Netta did something very special in Lisbon. She had a message, especially to girls, saying you don't have to be that Barbie-like character to be beautiful. You can be beautiful by being yourself, however you are. And that was a very important statement, together with some music that had a lot to do with the new Eurovision audience, which is very young. But then again, a totally different song won the next year. And every year you're going to be surprised by which songs do good or bad in Eurovision. But if the national selection is something representative of what the country is producing right now, that can be good as a key point to start.
Okay, so Nuno, going in that line, you've been engaged in the Eurovision Song Contest with different functions, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So as a member of the creative team of the Eurovision Song Contest 2018, that was held in Lisbon, can you explain to our audience a little bit of what that work involves, being a member of the creative team?
In the last few months, it involved going home like a very, very extremely rare steak. I said, go to bed, up again. But it was mainly a creative challenge in the beginning, because we got back from Kiev, and 1 week later, the core team, the creative core team, was gathering around the table to discuss what a Eurovision Song Contest in Lisbon should be like. And we thought we have to have a concept first, and then after the concept, we had to mold the TV shows and the CD relationship with it, and all the side events. Everything had to be related with a concept. And of course, we thought about Portuguese identity, about our relationship with the sea. 1998 was exactly 20 years after Expo 2000, Expo 98, which was all about our relationship with the oceans. And Portuguese history has a long tradition of a relationship with the oceans. So it was not that hard to think about our identity and what European identity represents, being all together, all aboard in the same boat, and sharing differences, but learning to live with them. And that is how we get better, by knowing each other's differences and getting to know them, and getting exposing ourselves and getting from others, and feeding and giving back. So a mishmash of those ideas, we came up with the all aboard concept. And gradually we started to think how the visuals, for instance, coming up with the logo.
Yeah.
And one of the first ideas was that why instead of one logo, why don't we have a family of logo expressing difference? So we had 13 different logos, and then which acts should be in the show besides the competing songs? What should the stage be like? How should the light be like? How should the visuals in the TV program be like? How should the city programming and dressing be like? It was a gradual process of building up ideas. We came up with most of these ideas June, July, and we started production pretty soon. I was working on a daily basis by August.
Gosh. Now, I have a question for Dave. Now, as a project manager of different events, can you explain what that is more precisely and adapt it to the Eurovision Song Contest 2021? I mean, what is the specificity of being a product manager, a project manager, but related to this event that we are speaking about?
Yes, I totally understand your question. We formed a core team in the city with several projects to manage, like logistics, safety, city marketing, handling the media, delegations, hospitality, but also the city program. Like Nuno just said, music can be something to connect, intercultural. It's a really strong mean of communication. And in Rotterdam, we have 180 different nationalities living there. It's a harbor city, an international city, open-minded, so open up to and listen to each other's music. So in each of these specific topics I just named, it's a project in itself. And it's like 10 to 12 different projects. The project like, for example, the opening ceremony, the senior key exchange, and the draw, and so on and so on. So it's really a big event, and each project has its own project manager, and my job is to get those project managers to work together. Most of them will do by themselves, and otherwise I'm there to help them out and try to oversee everything.
Great. So in other words, you are the general coordinator of several different departments, all working for the same objective.
Yeah, right? on a day-to-day basis, except for the TV show and everything that is happening on the stage and in front of the cameras. That's the job for the host broadcaster.
Okay.
But I'm there to help the host broadcaster out with my team, so they can do their work as they should.
Great. How many people do you have working with you?
If I'm not mistaken, we have like 12 project managers, and at the peak, there were working around 100 people on this.
Huge.
Every day, yeah, it's a really big team, and it's not that weird. A lot of people tell me it's huge and it's crazy, but hey, it's 200 million people watching this TV show.
Of course.
It's not that strange. That
it's not that. No. I don't think it's strange at all. Of course. No. Thank you.
So, Dave, you and Nuno as well. You are talking. Your topic, if we can summarize, it's engagement. We talk about engagement with the songs, engagement with the concept of Eurovision. And so Nuno explained us that for Portugal, this connection with this past of discoveries and the sea and the whole link with ocean, it's an identity issue in Portugal.
But it wasn't just the past, it was also the presence, our relationship with the oceans in the presence, and our need to make that safe so we can still have them in the future.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a thing about, oh, we were traveling all around the world 500 years ago. No, it was a relationship that was started to be built back then, but it grew with us and it's still with us, and we have to keep on with it for the future. For our sake.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. For the humankind as well. It's not a Portuguese topic. It's a big topic of our humankind. So we saw many details, as I can say it, in the blue carpet or in the different events in the city that brings this idea. So Dave, in Rotterdam, as you can say a little bit to maybe our audience is very curious about how the city of Rotterdam will pick this idea of open up and show it in the old city. I don't know if you can talk about it.
And the color of the carpet, we need to know. It was blue in Portugal. It was orange in Tel Aviv. So what is the new red for Rotterdam?
I have to keep...
it's the journalist, sorry. The journalist needs news.
That's a secret I like to share with you later on in about
a private
11 months or so.
Okay.
But our city would be and will be city dressed with a lot of flags, and you will not really see right away which flag is which. This is a part of the merchandise. Maybe you've seen it online, and we're actually gonna wrap up the whole city in flags. There was a really creative designer studio, and they came up with this idea to wrap up the city like Christo did, but not in a white piece of paper, but just wrap them around with flags, which really reflects what you see when you watch Eurovision and you see the fans waving the flags.
Exactly. The logo for Rotterdam is very interesting, but because it gathers us all. Because there's a bit of each country's flag in it. So in a way, it's not just Rotterdam and the Netherlands, it's us all. It's having us all together. That is amazing.
And they did it in the logo as well, true. And the proposition for all of our activities and what we do around the city is really opening up to each other. Like they did in Lisbon before, but Eurovision is always about connecting through music, meeting each other and listening and joining each other. So there's a lot of irony in the cancellation of this year, of course, that we were not able to meet for the first time in 65 years, which is really sad, but we still hold fast to the dream, and I know it's going to happen someday.
It will happen. Yeah.
It's good that you actually mentioned the cancellation, because I would like to hear you both, from your different perspectives, how you experienced this cancellation. So maybe start from the outside with Nuno. How did
Okay.
you experience this cancellation?
Well, personally and professionally. Professionally, and having done a Eurovision Song Contest, I know what it's the amount of work that has been done up until that moment. And the moment I started to conceive the idea of a maybe possibility of a cancellation in the near future, I thought of all the people involved in the Rotterdam team, meaning the huge amount of work, of hours, of passion laid there, that it's going to be not dumped, but has to be pressed stop, put it on hold, and up until next year. I always thought that what was announced in Shine a Light would happen. I always thought, okay, it's not going to happen this year, but it has to happen next year. So in a professional term, I felt much for all the team in Rotterdam, and the pain and the sadness that it brought to them. Personally, well, there are several levels in there. In a way, it was the chance to be again in such a big event that it became part of our lives, all our lives for years. It's so good to go there each year and meet again the friends we made from the years before, share ideas, meet new composers, meet new artists, meet new journalists, meet new fans. There's a lot of exchanging of information and finding out about new ideas every year. That is so. I was talking aloud with some artists last year about the huge amount of issues, and that's good because you build up new relationships in Eurovision every year. It would have been so beautiful to have all the 41 selected songs to go to that final stop, which is to perform in an Eurovision stage. And that was probably something very sad to all those interpreters and composers and lyricists and creative teams who did wonderful songs that suddenly had to stop before they would reach the end of the line. And of course, more personal even, I had mapped the record stores in Rotterdam, and I wanted to go there in the mornings before rehearsals, but that will have to wait to next year, because the Netherlands is a country with very good record stores. 2 years ago, I was digging for vinyl in Amsterdam, and now I thought May would be the month to do it in Rotterdam, but already waiting for next year then.
Exactly, you have to wait.
That's a very personal note, but believe me, I had mapped all the record stores in Rotterdam and see how many records could I visit this morning and that other morning. Okay, next year.
It will happen.
Oh yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I will be happy to
join you.
Yeah,
I was thinking the same thing.
I
was thinking of making myself invited.
That would totally happen, because I think we know how to go to the record stores and not think of the money we're spending there. But that is something you should not mention to our family. Don't let them know.
I think it's also an idea for Dave, in terms of tours to be offered to fans.
Oh yes, of
course. A tour of the vinyl stores.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if most of the Eurovision fans are enthusiastic vinyl junkies like Nuno,
like we are,
and me. But yes, of course, that's also something in terms of hospitality. We have an app. We have different walking tours. You can travel, you can walk, you can bike, you can go on a boat. There's a lot of stuff to do and to see. I've
been in Rotterdam once, only to see the Pop Mart tour of U2. That was in the late 90s.
In the Kuip, in the final stadium, I was there. Yes. Maybe I was standing next to you.
Yeah, we were probably enjoying the show. It was a great show.
With the big lemon on the stage.
Yes.
Oh, great memories.
It's such a small world after all.
It is.
Yeah,
It is.
exactly.
It is.
But Dave, now we would like to hear from you that perspective from an insider of the cancellation.
Yes, well, on a personal level, it wasn't that hard to pull the plug. At the end, it wasn't the city or the host broadcaster, it was the EBU who pulled the plug. And when it happened, it was also, this may sound a bit weird, but also relief, because the team who were working on this, not all of them, but a lot of people do read newspapers and watch the news. And we were seeing what was going on in Asia, first in January, February, coming over to Europe. And day by day, it became closer and closer. And when you hear on the news that so many people are hospitalized, there's really no room to be really, really sad when your event is being cancelled or postponed, as I can now say. So to put things in perspective, there are things worse in life, of course, but still, it's totally true what Nuno just said. It's incredible the amount of work you have to put into this event. Most people in the event business who are working on the team compare it to a world championship football or...
It is, but in 1 year,
Olympics.
They have 4 years. They have
Exactly.
2 years to do it. Eurovision is done all that work in 1 year. It's exactly that comparison. Yeah.
But only then in about 9 months.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. So it's like running a marathon, but filled with sprints. 400 meters before you can almost touch the finish line. You can see it coming over within reach, and then the curtain falls, the plug is pulled, and of course it's saddening. So we had some heavy talks with the people on the team. There was no way that in the months February and the beginning of March or January we could tell people, well, just slow down. Maybe it's going to be cancelled. No, everybody was like going full throttle. There's no slowing down. We're gonna go up there in the fifth gear, and then from one day to another, well, the emergency brake was pulled and the curtain fell. So a lot of people in the team were really, really sad because it was not at the first day. It was not certain that there would be that there will come 2021 edition. First, we had to persuade the city council again.
Of course.
And of course, there's also the host broadcaster and the EBU, who are the owner of this concept. And it's really up to them if they want to do it again or still, to be precise. And just a couple of days before Europe Channel Light, well, they decided that we're gonna give everything for a very, very good edition in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and that news was given to us, commentators of Shine a Light, on the spot. There was a void in the script saying special announcement, and we knew nothing about it when 2021 was announced. So it was right live on the spot that we were confronted with. That was the best news of that evening.
Yeah.
So that did soothe our pain.
Yeah.
If it was cancelled and there was no 2021 edition, I would be probably in tears, because now I know that 80 or 90% of the work we've put into this, it's not for nothing. It's still there.
Yeah,
and we're gonna finish the job.
Yeah.
We have to. Otherwise, the whole team will go to the mental institute.
So this is a very good hint. So let's just get to our live chat. So, and this is a question that I wanted to ask you anyway, Dave. So you are now dealing with Eurovision 2021. So Harry is asking, what could the Eurovision Song Contest look like if the current problems with the COVID-19 remain until autumn? And so this is, I think, a big question, because I guess that COVID-19 will be one of the major challenges for the organization of next year's event, because the TV show, of course, you can do it in a studio if it's necessary, but I mean, all the outdoor events without people.
Yes, of course, we hope that there will be a vaccine or a cure, or it will just go away. But of course, we are not naive, so we have to think of scenarios in which COVID is still among us. And just the last weeks, the lockdown has opened up in the Netherlands. It's becoming less strict, and we don't see like a second wave of patients. So that's something positive, and we hope to flatten the curve, as they say.
Exactly.
And if it's still here, we will have to take some measures, and maybe it's not possible to have a really big Eurovision village we were planning to do in the city center. Maybe you have seen the images online somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
It would have been an unforgettable experience with a lot of people coming over and party with each other. But if it's for health reasons, it's not possible. We just cannot do it. But you see a lot of people being creative, entrepreneurs, also cultural institutes, theaters, and they will think of a way to still meet and connect. And we're having this conference call right now as well, and I do have full confidence that in this year we have the luxury not to reinvent ourselves, because we already know what we're gonna do if we do the maximum edition. We're already we did the homework, and it's already there. I think the focus will be on adapting on the situation, and we have a lot of expertise on the team for this, and we have the time. So, but of course, I cannot predict how it will look like in May 2021. We'll find out, but we're gonna be there, and I promise you this: the city and the host broadcaster as well. We are very, very eager to give our best.
So you have lots of experience with this kind of big events. Which part of this puzzle for you is the most challenging?
The Eurovision.
Yeah.
In this project, for me personally, the most challenging thing when we started working on this project, for me was like, I can see the value of this, and I know how many fans there are, Eurovision fans all over Europe, watching this, eating, drinking Eurovision every day, and looking forward the whole year, and wanting to know everything about it. You can make a living out of it if you write a book about it, probably. But I didn't really know how the city would react on this, and will they really embrace this as they did. So that was not really challenging, but more I was curious if that would happen, and it did. What is challenging is the scale of things, because if we have the International Film Festival in Rotterdam, or a marathon, or a Champions League football game, there will be press, maybe 10 journalists, 20, maybe 40 or 50 or 60 or 100 maybe, but 1,500 journalists servicing them. That's crazy. That's out of this planet. And the delegations as well. Of course, we have really big festivals, big artists coming over to Ahoy Rotterdam, but most of the time it's just one artist, one band with, maybe a support band with them, but never 41 delegations at the same time being followed by fans and media. So it's a scale which was really challenging. But we had some comfort in the experience with the team we have on board. And also we learn a lot from other cities. We have a really good connection with Tel Aviv. When we were still in the bidding process, we went over to Tel Aviv and to do some research. And I got to meet the project team of Tel Aviv, and we could ask them anything we like. And they just had experienced Eurovision over there. So they were still fully focused and they could tell us everything. So we could learn a lot from them.
That's great. Okay, so Nuno, I have another question for you. I mean, I don't know if as a fan, you have traveled following the different Eurovision Song Contests. Have you? No.
Never before working there.
Never.
My first Eurovision was 2017. So I say when I go to some event, we tend to win.
Right, okay. So, but anyway, what I would like to ask you is, I mean, from 2017 until, well, last year, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you covered like 3 different Eurovision Song Contests, and one of them you were deeply involved in it, which was the Lisbon one.
Yes.
So from the 2017 to the 2019 last years, did you perceive, well, including Lisbon as well, how did you perceive the host cities? I mean, what differences did you perceive in these 3 host cities?
Yeah, you have to be there to be allowed to have that sort of reconnaissance, even though, even if you stay at your own country, you always have a chance of watching and learning a bit about each host city, because with the artist, there goes a TV crew.
Exactly.
That has to do daily reports, short pieces that are presented on daytime television or at news services. So I remember ever since I was watching Eurovision to have visuals from the cities being visited by Portuguese artists since the 70s. But of course, it's a totally different experience being there. Of course, with Lisbon, I had a totally different experience because I saw all the preparation of what would happen in the city, and I had no way to experience because I was working all those days. I had the chance to go to. I had a chance to go to Eurovision Village for once, because I was doing the commentary for the blue carpet ceremony from there. And then I went to the blue carpet party and then back to the venue. And I stayed all days of those 2 weeks of rehearsals and shows. So the Eurovision, when Eurovision moves to Lisbon, I was even more closed around the venue. So I had no chance to see how Lisbon related to it. But living in central Lisbon, I knew that my friends were telling me that restaurants were packed, that there was a lot of people going to visit places, and the city was all dressed. So I got that information, but I had no chance to live it myself. But I had that in Kiev and in Tel Aviv. And it's a great way to get to know a place, traveling to watch Eurovision. If you're lucky or rich enough to buy a ticket, of course, you can go in the venue. But if you're not, and it's good to have that experience from Rotterdam, because Rotterdam was preparing not only an idea to experience the show, but also the city. And that is very important because the city has a whole new way to express itself to visitors from all over. It's a key moment to show what you're all about, and how you enjoy having others within your space and sharing with them something that you can translate as the Eurovision mood, which is the joy of sharing experience through music, but through relationships, connecting, enhancing something that might be far away, but suddenly it's there, and you can discuss it, and you can buy records, Eurovision or not.
Exactly.
So I did some record shopping in Kiev and in Tel Aviv. Of course I did.
Okay. Okay.
But it's very interesting. Sorry for interrupting.
No, it's okay.
It's a very good way for a city to expose itself. Of course, every city has a tourist office. Tourists come to every city every year. But Eurovision is a very strong opportunity for a city to show up to many different persons from many different nationalities at the very same time. So you can use the short amount of time that things happen to enhance the communication globally.
Gosh, I'm already counting down to next year's Rotterdam, really.
Aren't we all?
Yeah. Okay, but I have a different question for Dave, because as you were telling us a couple of minutes ago, you are a lazy fan. And so I imagine you never traveled following the Eurovision Song Contest. You followed it probably through the television broadcast emissions, I don't know. So my question would be, were you aware of the big changes that in the last 8 years, 7 years, because this year there wasn't, I mean, specifically from 2012, the Eurovision Song Contest endured? Were you aware as a lazy fan watching the program at home?
Lazy as in not traveling.
Yeah. Of course. Lazy as in not traveling.
Yeah. But of course, yes. We've seen the wilderness years,
exactly.
as I like to call them.
Yeah, I call it exactly the same thing. I call it the desert years.
Yes. So yeah, there's been a revival, I think. And along the Dutch entries since 2011, there's been like a comeback.
Totally. Anouk was amazing. And the common linnets were amazing.
Yeah, and I'm not here saying that thanks to the Dutch entry, Eurovision is back on a higher level.
We understood.
But there is, but I do see a certain tendency that the quality of the artists and the composers and the song has definitely totally got the upgrade that it deserved. So
yes.
Really happy with that.
Yes.
And
I'm really happy with that too.
We can perceive it gradually. It's been coming up. I think the change of voting around the end of the first decade, when it stopped being all televote and you have jury vote and televote, it enhanced the possibility of songs not so easy to the ear at a first glimpse to have a chance to compete for a nicer slot.
Exactly.
So Eurovision is going a very interesting way these days.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Yeah.
So Nuno, you was in the conversation.
It wasn't me. It wasn't me.
You were giving some advices to Dave, but if you should a big advice to as a fan and as a professional as well in the organization, what is the advice that you do to Dave?
Laugh all day. Because we worked like crazy, really. It was constant work, early mornings, late nights, being there all time, lots of things happening, unexpected things happening all day. And especially people taking care of logistics and relationship with the city. Many things happen every day, but even in the final stage of my creative team, I was more focused around the script and the presentings, getting to know the script, because there was no way for them to read. They had no teleprompter, so they had to memorize everything. And it was a challenge to do that. So, and sometimes you have changes in the script to adjust the time of the TV show. But even working hard was the thing most certain for all of us every day. Laughing was even stronger. We had a great team, and we liked being with others and partying all over. So I have some videos of the team being there at around 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., our eyes like brr, like that. But suddenly someone would pick a dance song and we would dance in the production office for 5 minutes and then back to work again. And we were enjoying being with each other and laughing a lot. And most of us work in RTP. And for the few months after it ended, we were still telling stupid jokes, like those kids who come from summer camps. And it's those silly jokes they know themselves because they were there, and nobody else around you can understand. But we were still that happy because we worked like hell, but we laughed.
Yeah. Dave, how do you relate to this experience? Are you experiencing something similar?
It sounds like Nuno is part of my team. Only difference is I have no sense of humor, so I might have a problem here.
Oh, I'll share you my collection of crazy videos with the creative team. Oh my God. They would do a very good documentary, but not to be broadcasted.
Yeah.
Come on.
No, but on a serious note, it does feel like a family. And sometimes it's a lot of loving and hugging, which we're not allowed anymore. But
yeah, of course.
But you make friends for life if you produce an Eurovision among your team. You really make friends for life.
It's really bonding. It's a bonding experience.
Yes.
And sometimes after the work is done for that day, we go out and have some food and drinks.
Yes.
And then it's really, really hard to go back home early.
Yeah. And then
so much fun and so much experience you want to share with each other and tell each other. And it's just in the heat of the moment, you can have a lot of workload if you have the right team with the right personalities and they respect each other as persons, then you can really do a lot.
And
it sounds cheesy, but
but it's that way.
It is.
We still do dinners, getting the team back together.
Oh, great!
We still did Christmas parties, getting the team back together, and of course, in each party we dance Fuego.
Yeah.
And I can't dance as well, so there I go.
Oh.
But we do have a plan for a reunion in 2022.
Yes.
Because we hope Jean-Gu will win again for the Netherlands. So
that was one of the best songs this year.
But
the Netherlands.
I'm not sure if it was.
I loved it.
Do you think it was going to be a winner? Because in the polls it ended around like number 12 or so.
Host countries can do 26th, 25th, 24th, 23rd, around there. Host countries never do very well when they. But the song was amazing. And he's a very, very good singer.
Great voice.
Yes, great voice. And I think if people could listen to the songs and live with them further than just those shows, because Eurovision fans do not represent the Eurovision audience. For the Eurovision TV audience, those songs are being presented that night. But if you had a chance to live with some of those more difficult or not so easy or cheesy songs for a while, you might get to learn how to deal with them. And I can bring up the case of Kononosidis last year. The song didn't do very well in the first semi-final. It actually didn't go to the final. But as the year came to an end, there was a poll. And the song was polled as the 26th best Eurovision song ever, and the 5th best out of 2019. So it took even to Eurovision fans a few months to get to learn how to like a song that was a bit different. And the Dutch song from this year, you could had trouble with it at the first time because it's not a song that gets to your ear like an easy melody. But I can compare it with Birds from Anouk. There's something that stays there and you want to get back to that song and then back again. And then you learn to love that voice. and suddenly that song becomes one of your favorites. That's what happened to me.
So we kind of have understood we need time. And
Yes,
this time we
did
have
that.
time.
Yeah, and the relationships of song and time is something we changed in Portuguese television over the last 3 years. The songs are not presented as a premiere on the night of the semifinals. We release them total songs, all the total length of the songs in January, so people get to know them. And people get to build up a relationship to them. When I was a kid, I remember all national broadcasters would show the Eurovision songs the weeks before the program. Back then, there was just one show. There were not semifinals.
Yeah.
There were 20-something countries competing. That was the 80s. Most of these memories relate to the late 70s and probably the 80s. But I remember after the main news service, every night you got to see 1, 2, or 3 Eurovision songs. So they were, of course, Eurovision fans, I stress that again, they know everything about the songs ever since they go up on the local finals. But the major mainstream TV audiences, that was a way for them to get acquainted with the songs gradually, and the radio would play them back then. So that engagement, there we go back, that key word, engagement with the songs, was being built by the national broadcasters before the actual shows to a mainstream TV audience.
Do you guys remember the Iceland band Hatari?
Of course, from last year. Yes, Hatari from last year. Yes, it was my favorite song last year.
Oh, really?
Yes, very weird song, but I loved it.
These guys, I saw with my own eyes what happens with an artist once they enter the Eurovision Song Contest, because I also have a professional involvement with a metal festival in Rotterdam, quite big, medium big, 10,000 people coming over, a lot of black shirts, black hair,
and
metal heads. We our booker had already asked Hatari to come over to play at the festival, which was set just 4 months after Tel Aviv. And normally, I do know the people coming over to that festival, but now all of a sudden there were like 150 teenage girls not wearing black shirts, queuing after the gig, after the performance, in line to get an autograph on their arm or wherever. And it was crazy.
That is amazing. That is so good. That is something that only Eurovision can do. Because if you go to a summer festival, even those with a very wide programming of from dance music to indie rock to 1 or 2 major mainstream, more veteran acts, even so, you don't have the amount of diversity of songs that might drop by at Eurovision, because you never know what comes in. And Eurovision, I remember Lisbon, you had hard rock from Hungary. And you had a vocal jazz act from Georgia. How different could that be? And it's
wow.
and that is beautiful. That is beautiful.
And these guys, they were like, well, I asked them, how did you like it, the whole Eurovision thing? Because I was already involved in the bidding and this wonderful job. And they were like, it was crazy. Never again. But we're really thankful we participated, because it's an enormous boost for the artists as well. We spoke about the cities. It's the grand prize in city marketing. It's connecting people. It's connecting fans from all over Europe.
Yeah,
they're allowed to travel to see each other every year. But for the artists, it's an amazing step up the ladder.
Yeah. Okay, so Nunu and Dave, we would like to thank you very much for your presence here, but before going away, we would like to ask you if you could leave our audiences and fans some encouraging words about the next Eurovision Song Contest.
Who should start?
Yes.
We want to hear
right now.
I will end.
Right now.
You'll end, so I can start. Well, what should we wait for? Personally, I wait for the Yugoslavian single from 1970 to drop by my record collection. Joking. What should we wait for? Well, I think this year is a year that we should celebrate the songs, the 41 songs, in an even more emotional and physical way than before, because they were not allowed to reach the finish line, but we have them. We should buy the CD. I'm not doing marketing for the record company or for EBU, but that is one way for have those songs physically living with us.
Yeah.
It's a way, of course, music flows digitally these days. Everybody knows that digital platforms and streaming platforms, that's the main way that music business of flowing music from the artist to record company or to listeners is flowing this ways. But having a CD, and not having the promo CDs. That's something I'll miss from 2020. I didn't get the promo CDs, which is something I always look for when I go to Eurovision. And even when I was not going there, I was having friends or buying them, because promos would exist. This year, nobody produced promos. But as far as I know, if anyone knows about a promo being produced, please let me know. My record collection will thank you. But going back to it, I think we should treasure those songs more than usual. We choose our favorites every year, but these songs deserve a special place in our lives, because they're special babies who were not allowed to blossom the way others were, but they're entitled to have a life. And since the programs did not exist, of course we had China Light, but we didn't have semifinals and a final. Since they were not allowed to exist that way, we can make them exist with ourselves. So we have a whole year to celebrate those songs, and even more, to go back to all other 60 plus years of Eurovision songs, finding them again, treasuring them. It's so good to pick up a country and fly through the timeline, going from 1956, picking up Switzerland up until today. We pick each other country and see their Eurovision history, and you can see not only how music aesthetically grew up from the mid 50s to today, but you can also check how European history and how European social history is being represented in those songs all through these years. So we have a whole year to dive into Eurovision history, learn to know those songs. The younger audiences, those who were born luckily enough to be welcomed into an Eurovision arena and be standing there dancing with a flag. I wasn't. If I wanted to do that when I was 19 or 15, I would have to buy a black tie and sit and clap like this.
Exactly.
In front of a Eurovision stage, because that was the way it was before. But it's good even for younger audiences to treasure time and discover Eurovision past history. There are a lot of interesting songs beyond Loreen to find out. And Loreen is amazing.
What about you, Dave?
My focus is around songs. Go back and find the songs.
So what about you, Dave? What encouraging words do you have for our audience about 2021?
I was happy that I let Nuno talk first, because I totally agree with the songs not being launched in a proper way. That really is a shame, but this is a way to cherish the products these artists made, those little gems. So I do hope everybody follows his advice. The team in Rotterdam and the host broadcaster will be there to celebrate this great event with the city, with the fans, welcoming the artists and delegations to the city, opening up and make a wonderful, wonderful experience out of it. And I have a last message to all of you who are watching this. And this is not staged. This is something I already had ordered before the COVID stuff entered our life. It's a powerful message. And you all will know what I mean.
And actually, if I go live here, I'm in London. We have Clap for Carers happening right now.
Wow.
So what's
a
another
wonderful
year?
message.
What's another year? Johnny Logan
Yeah.
could have said it better.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
What a wonderful message to wrap up this session of Eurovisions. Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you so much, Nuno, for being with us.
Thank
was a
you.
pleasure.
Thank you
It
to
was
you,
a
the
pleasure.
audience,
Yes.
for
Yeah.
being
12
with
for
us.
next year.
12 points for you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lots of luck with the show.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you.
So this was the second semi-final of the Eurovision's International Conference this year.
And we all go to the final.
Yeah. So we all go to the grand final on Saturday evening at 6 o'clock German time, 5 o'clock Portuguese and English time. So we hope you will all be with us when we are talking about the challenges for the broadcasters, for the singers, for the composers, and for everyone who's grieving the cancellation of Eurovision 2020.
Postpone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not cancel it.
Postponement. Exactly.
Postponement.
Exactly.
So we all wish you a wonderful evening and look forward to see you all on Saturday evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.